There were literally bullet holes in the wall. I don't want to go into why, mainly because I don't know why, but also I don't want to think too hard about why. I am the kind of irritating person who wants to talk about rewilding, particularly wildflowers. If you follow me on social media, you're probably over this topic. And if you are, I'm sorry, you're probably in the wrong place for today, because that is what today's episode's about. This episode is a little bit special. For one, Earth Day is basically right after this episode goes live. So it's like a cosmic sign that we should talk about giving the planet some love, I suppose. But also, rewilding isn't actually something I've just read about in glossy magazines. It's actually something I have done and been doing for years, and I am absolutely seeing the payoff in my own garden. It's really quite remarkable how quickly the planet will regenerate if we just left it alone, or even better, gave it a helping hand. I remember when I moved in, there was absolutely nothing in this place. It had been neglected for, I think we estimate about 4 to 5 years, so not really that long, but it was full of weed mat and dead plants and just misery and ignorance and neglect. Like there were literally bullet holes in the wall. I don't want to go into why, mainly because I don't know why, but also I don't want to think too hard about why. So I'm just going to ignore it. But we pulled out the weed mat. We planted, I think, on last count, 8,000 plants, about 50-50 native exotic, because of course we have both native and exotic insects and wildlife. And then lots and lots of work, but we've just, let it grow, and it's freaking amazing. It looks absolutely beautiful. If you don't believe me, go and have a look at my social media. You'll see what I mean. But today I want to have a talk about what rewilding actually is, and it's not just letting your garden go feral. Somebody said that to me the other day. It's just an excuse not to mow your lawn. Well, no. But also, if you don't want to mow your lawn, go for it. It's way better for the environment. But I also wanted to include some famous examples from around the world and right here in Aotearoa. I also wanted to just touch on, in light of the news, bringing back extinct wildlife. And I was going to use the woolly mammoth as an example, but now apparently we have dire wolves. Of course we don't. They are grey wolves with a sprinkling of an ancient genome. Like, they're as much of a dire wolf as I am. And actually, the whole hype around it has been kind of a bit anti-science, oddly enough, from a science organisation. But here we are. So, rewilding is an interestingly controversial subject. But let's have a look at how we can help nature heal, shall we? Rewilding is the term used in many conservation organisations, which is a phrase you should say 3 times fast. And it's usually to sound more exciting than habitat conservation or habitat restoration. But if I am particular about it, in broad terms, rewilding simply means to bring an ecosystem back to something close to its original state before humans started mowing the living daylights out of everything and planting pine trees everywhere. That involves stepping back, often letting nature do the hard work if the area hasn't been too messed up, and just leaving it alone. Or it sometimes means rolling up our sleeves, digging out weed mat, and doing a lot of stuff like planting or removing weeds or introduce predators. Can be from either side of the spectrum. Either way, the end goal is a healthy, self-sustaining ecosystem like how it used to be, because there are very few truly wild spaces anywhere in the world anymore, and that's pretty alarming. As I mentioned in the intro, there are some people out there who just think that rewilding is an excuse for laziness, which is baffling to me, but there are people who will call you lazy for almost anything these days. The idea that it's just letting everything go wild is an oversimplification, because we're ignoring the fact that there are so many environments that are so trashed. If we just left them alone, they'd turn into gorse jungles or pest-ridden wastelands. So sorry to break it to you. If your land is overrun with stoats, and I appreciate they're cute, but they are just not good in Aotearoa. And if it's tender dry from deforestation, or it's rock hard from bloody weed mat, which I will ban when I'm Supreme Overlord, you can't just leave it to nature to try and fix it. That's not how it works. There is the point on the flip side, of course, that we can go too far and we can get too involved. That's a conversation that a lot of people who participate in wildlife photography actually have, because they are witnessing quite often pretty horrific acts, or some, wildlife that might be starving, or environments that need some help. But the job of a photographer is to document, not get involved. There are some very famous examples where we may have gone too far in the opposite direction. Are we helping nature? Are we just controlling it? Or really, are we just overthinking it and we just need to get on with it? I kind of feel like that's the answer to a lot of these things we debate. But I want to start with some famous stories you've probably heard of. Tomorrow is Earth Day. Apparently, the Earth only gets a day, or I guess a month, if you're a brand and wanting to use it as a marketing opportunity. And you're going to see a lot of negative communication, so let's have some positive stuff. First of all, Yellowstone. I don't know if there's many people who haven't heard of this story. Yellowstone National Park and it's wolves. It's the poster child for reintroducing an apex predator after nearly a century of wiping them out. So back in the late 1800s, folks decided that wolves weren't great because they were, of course, predating on their cattle, predating on the wildlife, probably predating on people, although actually wolves don't do that too much, so perhaps not. So they said, well, see you, wolves, and eradicated them, as humans are just so good at doing. Then, of course, elk populations exploded, as you'd expect. They grazed everything down in sight, and they turned many parts of the park into kind of a desiccated, weed-strewn nightmare, unless you're an elk. And then it was heaven. And the impact it actually had on the land cannot be overstated. Pictures of Yellowstone from back then show that it's massively lacking in biodiversity, which is a sign of a healthy ecosystem. It looks dry. It looks almost like a desert, but not, which is just the best description ever. But if we fast forward to 1995, they brought wolves back. Elk get the reminder that life isn't a perpetual buffet. Vegetation starts recovering. Beavers return. Beavers are one of my favourite animals in the whole world. Beavers return, they build dams, they redirect rivers. Because of that, wetlands have flourished, and everybody celebrated. And that was from the reintroduction of one species. And that's pretty freaking phenomenal. The proper term by ecologists is a trophic cascade. It just basically means that if you fix one thing at the top of the food chain, it will ripple down to benefit plants and animals and river systems. Fix one big problem and a bunch of smaller problems sort themselves out. Now, obviously, it wasn't all a fairy tale. Ranchers near Yellowstone became, again, afraid for their wildlife. Some remain upset to this day, but a lot of other people welcomed the return of the wolves as a huge tourist boon. I mean, I would love to go there and befriend a wolf because I have this ridiculous notion that animals will understand that I love them and I mean them no harm, so they'll be nice to me. And it's probably only a matter of time till I'm eaten by something. That is why I've had the rabies jab, even though I live in a country that doesn't have rabies. But that's kind of rewilding in a nutshell, really. Nature is stoked, does well. Humans have mixed feelings about it. And eventually we find some level of coexistence, although coexistence isn't actually our strength. Talking about beavers, Scotland has done something relatively similar. After a few centuries of realising that, maybe killing all the beavers was a bad idea, they decided they'd bring them back. So, surprise, beavers actually do really good stuff. And did you even know they existed in Scotland way back when? Well, there you go. They do all the same good stuff in Scotland that, of course, they do in North America. They slow down rivers. That means they create wetlands, which helps out fish and birds, helps out invertebrates, all the way down. And, of course, annoys anyone who doesn't like watery landscapes. Now, just as a contrary to what people think about beavers don't just build dams willy-nilly. They don't think, oh, there's a stick, I'm going to chew it and make a dam. They're nature's engineers. There's a famous story from a couple of months ago where beavers saved Czech taxpayers about $1.2 million by building a dam where they were already planning to. And they did it much quicker and probably much more structurally sound. Beavers are nature's little engineers. And Scotland is one of the many places reaping the rewards. Now, they're also talking about bringing back lynx to manage deer populations and help forests recover, a little bit like the story in Yellowstone. But as you can imagine, that one's going down a little bit less well because some farmers will see that as the introduction of sheep-killing ninjas, and people argue about whether it's safe, whether there's enough room, and whether the highlands can handle those apex predators again. At the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, bring them back. It was their home first, but apparently you have to tread carefully when you're working with lots of people. This is why I'm not a diplomat. In northeastern Argentina, the Iberian wetlands may be one of the largest rewilding projects on Earth, and I keep saying this, but this is one of my favourite animals, the jaguar. Now, if you're from England, you'll say jaguar. Wherever you're from almost anywhere else, you say jaguar. I do not know which is correct, but I think jaguar sounds quite posh, so I won't be saying it because I don't want to sound silly. But apparently jaguars used to roam there until people, they shot them. And now conservationists are doing the work of reintroducing the coolest cats in the world to control herbivore populations like peccaries and capybaras. And yes, capybaras are also awesome, but there is a lot of them and they do cause harm. The ecological results are promising, although it's still early, and unfortunately local ranchers are not super on board with this yet, but they will be when they see the benefit to nature, which is, of course, something they rely on as farmers too. One of the biggest lessons from there when I read some of the stuff from conservation experts is that you simply will not have a successful rewilding project unless you get the local communities on board, particularly farmers.